During my youth and high school, I had a girlfriend with whom I chased my dreams. I cherished her with all my heart, but I betrayed her feelings. We met again at a school reunion more than 10 years after our breakup, and she looked down on me with chilly eyes. Later, we had a fateful reunion on the same plane again. My name is Anthony Gracier. That day, I was getting dressed up for the first time in a long time and styling my hair in a fresh way. We had a high school reunion that night, and because it was a day off from work, I was able to attend. As I entered the venue, my friends from high school spoke to me. The soccer team's star player at the time was as fit as ever. The nerdy friend who used to get thrilled about anime was now a model and had undergone a significant transformation. Some people have changed, some people have not. I enjoyed spending time with my friends for the first time in a long time while being excited by the strange sensation.
We had a lot of fun back then, didn't we? Actually, I was about to freak out before I got here.
I didn't graduate with everyone, so I felt awkward.
What are you talking about? Even though it's true we did have a great time in high school.
I'm feeling blessed to have good friends.
But I was saved by the words of my friend in front of me. As we started talking about the good old days, practically everyone's attention was drawn to a woman who arrived late. The woman who stood out from the crowd was quickly approached by friends of both sexes. Her name was Victoria Taylor. She was the queen bee of our high school, popular with both boys and girls. She still looked nice, and the boys were seeking an opportunity to approach her while the girls were occupied talking to her. I was one of those who was admiring Victoria, but the minute our gaze connected, she gave me a look.
Haven't you made up with her yet?
My friend looking at Victoria and me alternately with a glass of alcohol in his hand. We never even met again in the first place.
I replied to my friend with her eye smiles. I remember those days. The word makeup made my heart constrict.
As the reunion drew to a close, the noisy establishment became even worse due in part to the force of the drink. Had people I'd been drinking non-alcoholic beverages, so I stood back and watched my pals have a good time.
It's been a long time, Anthony.
It's then Victoria, who is also holding a non-alcoholic drink in her hand, slipped out of the group and came to me.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while.
We exchanged a few awkward greetings, and there was a short pause of silence.
I still haven't forgiven you for being a coward and running away from an important exam. You couldn't even attend the graduation ceremony because you couldn't bring yourself to show your face in front of us.
She said this with cold eyes as if she was looking down on me. It's been so many years since then, and yet you still held a grudge against me. To be honest, I was surprised, but then I realized how much I had let her down. Hey, Anthony, why did you do that? We don't need to talk about it anymore. We've both moved on to new things. Let's just forget about it. I interrupted Victoria's attempt to ask me and forced her to end the conversation. Victoria's unsatisfied gaze in my eyes reminded me of our high school days. I had always dreamed of becoming a doctor and aspire. Victoria aspired to be a nurse, and we both encouraged each other to pursue a medical career. Whenever I went to the library after school, she was always there. We began studying in the library together, and the number of days we studied until the sun went down rose. We began to develop love for each other, and in the spring of our junior year of high school, I expressed my feelings for her, and we began dating. We will work as a doctor and a nurse in the same hospital in the future. That was our big goal and promise. However, I declined the National Medical School entrance exam. Victoria was upset with me because I didn't tell her why I didn't take the exam. She blamed me for not making our dream a reality together. Rumors spread that I didn't take the exam because I wasn't sure whether I'd be admitted and fled terrified. Now, I suspect they were shared by someone who was envious of my relationship with Victoria. But Victoria believed the rumors, even though she didn't know where they were coming from, and she graduated high school disillusioned with me.
You know about what happened.
Victoria's eyelids were downcast as she considered something, but her words were drowned out by the girl shouting out to her, not me this time. Victoria reluctantly left me, and somewhere inside, I was relieved. I could have informed her what occurred, but couldn't change the past. Victoria reluctantly left me, and somewhere inside I was relieved. I could have informed her about what occurred, but I couldn't change the past, so there was no need for me to tell her. I didn't want to cause her feelings to be disturbed. Thus, when the first party was about to end, I called out to my friend and quietly left since I had work the next day. A few months after the reunion, I maintained in touch with my pals, whom I had met after a long time that day, and we occasionally got together for a drink. At that time, they told me that Victoria was now working as a nurse at a university hospital. One of my friends happened to see her when he was sick at the hospital.
Anthony, you should try to approach her again. You two were a perfect couple in high school.
My friend attempted to persuade me to get back together with her, but I remembered Victoria's chilly stare when we met that day. I'm not good enough for her. I can only smile and say so. After that, I was on a plane to another state for a training session, recalling the episode. I was exhausted from the hard work I had done every day, so I put on my eye mask and tried to sleep for the 1-hour flight.
Excuse me? Can I pass?
Oh, I'm sorry, Victoria?
Wait, is that you, Anthony?
I spoke to the woman who was about to sit next to me, and to my surprise, she was Victoria. I had assumed I'd never see her again, but what a coincidence. When Victoria noticed me, she stopped moving as if time had frozen, and gave me a shocked expression. Then the in-flight announcement started and Victoria rushed to sit down. We were both feeling awkward, and time passed without a word from each other for 30 minutes after the plane took off. I felt sleepy, yet my tiredness had vanished, and I was wide awake. We were both heading to the state, and I was wondering if we were going to the same training session.
Is there a doctor among you? Sloppian.
I'm a doctor. I'm coming.
I quickly got up and went to the flight attendant. I presented my medical license to prove that I was a doctor. The flight attendant looked relieved and guided me over to the fallen elderly man.
I'm a nurse. If you need anything I can help, Anthony, I found his medication book.
I checked the old man's consciousness, but he was not responding well. I asked his family member who was watching over him about his medical history, but the man seemed to be his son who had been estranged from him for a while. He told me he was on a trip with his father, whom he hadn't seen in a few years, and that he was embarrassed to admit how little he knew about him.
Can you hear me? Do you know where you are?
I checked the old man's consciousness, but he was not responding well. I asked his family member who was watching over him about his medical history, but the man seemed to be his son, who had been estranged from him for a while. I concluded that the old man was suffering from temporary hypoglycemia. I asked the flight attendant to bring me something to drink that contained sugar. Fortunately, the old man was not unconscious, so I supported him and Victoria poured orange juice down his throat. We got confirmation that he had swallowed it and carefully continued to give him the drink. He drank a little at a time, and as he rested, he began to regain consciousness. We determined that an emergency landing was unnecessary after he regained consciousness. I requested that an ambulance be dispatched to take him to the hospital as soon as the plane arrived, just to take a taste. The flight attendant thanked me and said, "Thank you very much for your help. We really appreciate it." Anthony also expressed his gratitude and said, "This was my first experience, and I know I may have made you all feel uneasy. Thank you for trusting us and following our instructions." Despite the fact that I did not provide any unique medical care or anything to be praised for, they still offered to thank me. For a while, the interchange of gratitude continued. Victoria was also thanked in the same manner. She also said that she had done nothing unusual. It was also amusing because everyone was attempting to thank each other. I was happy to know he was safe, and I was headed to the hotel I had reserved to rest up before the training session.
Anthony, do you have a minute? Anthony, do you have a minute?
But that became impossible when Victoria stopped me. Victoria and I went to a cafe at the airport. We had a difficult time picking which local delicacy to have, but after much consideration, we settled on normal hot coffee. Victoria was the first to speak up in a mood of tension.
Anthony, are you a doctor now?
She looked happy, but sad. I honestly admitted it. Yeah, it was a little later than I had planned, but I've become a doctor, which was my goal. That's when I told Victoria that I achieved my goal. She rolled her eyes and was speechless.
But why didn't you take the exam back then?
Because Victoria was panicking and trying to figure out what was going on. I decided to tell her why I hadn't taken the admission exam to the National Medical School in high school. Victoria dictated. Truth is, I was hospitalized and treated for leukemia right after I graduated from high school.
Leukemia? What are you talking about?
A team one day before I was to take the entrance exam for college, I went to the hospital with severe fatigue and fever. I thought it must be a cold, but what I was told was shocking. I had acute leukemia. I had to start treatment immediately, so I gave up on applying to college. My grades were good and my attendance was sufficient, so I was sure I would graduate. The side effects were far stronger than I had expected, and I wanted to curse my bad luck. I kept visualizing everyone's graduation ceremony, their dazzling new life, and the bright future that would follow while lying in my hospital bed alone. This naturally made me envious and sad. I started crying because I felt like I was the only one who was sad. I hated myself with all my heart. The conflict with no end in sight was slowly affecting my emotions. I gave up on my dreams and lost the future of my friends and my beloved Victoria. The sense of loss was so great that I even lost the will to get over my illness. But I was able to hold on because of the memories I had with Victoria. I heard a rumor about Victoria's acceptance to nursing school. I was as pleased as if it had been my achievement. I knew that Victoria would start a new life and be blessed with new encounters. I was hoping for Victoria's bright and shiny future, and I imagined myself being with her. As for the other things, I was still envious and conflicted, but in the case of Victoria, I could only wish her a great future. Victoria's success motivated me to continue with my treatment. The fact that I couldn't be with her was sometimes depressing. But the fact that Victoria was doing her best alone was enough to motivate me to keep going. Decisions in the end, thinking about her naturally brought me out of the negative feelings that were smoldering inside me. After a long stay in the hospital, the treatment was successful and I was able to return to my normal life. A few years after I graduated from high school, I didn't let anyone know about my illness except for my homeroom teacher and my family. I didn't want to be a burden to my friends, including Victoria, at that important time. That's why I didn't deny anything when rumors like that spread. But when I met my friends again later at the reunion, I told them about my illness for the first time.
Why didn't you tell me? I made you fight alone during such a difficult time. I screamed nasty things at you, Anthony, calling you a coward and accusing you of fleeing. I didn't know what was going on, and I'm sorry for hurting you by saying things that pushed you further into for illness and a corner.
It's okay. I didn't want you to suffer the burden of my illness, and I wanted you to focus on your own goals. I didn't say that, but gently sat down next to her and rubbed her back.
You know what, Victoria, now that I think about it, I'm glad I got sick.
She looked at me very surprised, but that was the truth.
And the disease was unexpected and terrible, but when I met the hematologist who cured me, I knew from the bottom of my heart that I wanted to be a doctor.
He changed my life forever. He had the integrity to tell me everything as it was, without hiding anything, and he was a mysterious person who never treated me like a sick person. He always paid me a joyful visit in the hospital ward, spoke about trivial matters, and chuckled alone. Because I was emotionally unstable, I assumed he was a jerk at first, but gradually his cheerful attitude helped me and I opened my heart to him.
I was once very sick, just like you, Anthony. That's why I know how much time you spend in the hospital room, how lonely you are, how anxious you are. That's why I know how you feel, and I just want to hang in there with you.
The doctor's words made me realize that I didn't want to give up on my dream after all. After leaving the hospital, a few years passed. I decided to take the entrance exam for the National Medical School again. I informed Victoria that I had passed the exam. I had worked hard for a few more years to become a hematologist, a fledgling one.
After what happened, I'm hurt. I'm here right now. You don't have to feel sorry for anything.
I was not looking for any apologies from her. I just wanted us to be friends, even if we couldn't be lovers again since we met by chance again. Ever since then, I've only loved Victoria. She's strong-minded, cheerful, open-minded, dignified, and hardworking. I've always loved Victoria like that. Even after we broke up, I couldn't say it out loud because I didn't want her to think that I was still obsessed with her.
I still love you, Anthony.
But Victoria said something I hadn't expected. She said, "I've only loved you ever since we broke up. I dated someone else once, but compared to you, we broke up after only 2 days." She also expressed guilt that she was preoccupied with herself at the moment and couldn't think about my condition. She said that she was angry, sad, and felt a great sense of loss, thinking that I had given up on our dreams without consulting her. Then she apologized, explaining that her sentiments had gradually returned to rage, and that she had let them out on me. For the first time, I realized that maybe it was only my ego that kept me from telling her about my condition. Victoria had suffered because I hadn't told her what had happened.
I was happy to see you for the first time in a long time at the reunion, but I actually regretted my attitude after I left. I know it's too late for this, but I still love you, Anthony. I can't help fate.
I cried in front of Victoria, who was trying her best to tell me how she felt about me.
I'm sorry for hurting you with my ego. If I had been honest with you back then, maybe we could be together now. When I think about it, all I can say is that I'm sorry.
Victoria shook her head in denial at my words.
I'm sorry, Victoria. I've always loved you too.
I was finally able to tell her my honest feelings. I told her that I still loved her again and over, and she sobbed as she covered her face with her hands.
She said, "I can't believe you still love me after all the terrible things I said to you."
Of course I do. I can't imagine myself, hating you. And
causing a scene. However, people continued to congratulate us and told us that there was no need to apologize. Finally, Victoria and I left the airport, telling each other how we felt about each other again and deciding to be in a relationship. Victoria, who I thought was at the same training session, seemed to have just come to see her sister and left in the opposite direction. She repeatedly turned around and waved at me. As I waved her goodbye, I hurried to my feet to make it to the training session on top. Pushing the Kivana clicked map, we began to see each other to fill the void left by our separation. After a year of dating, we decided to live together. I put more effort into my daily work and studies to get closer to my aim of being a hematologist. Victoria was doing the same, trying her best to do more than she could. Our friends warmly congratulated us as we worked hard and encouraged each other as if we were back in the old days. My leukemia had not recurred and I able to live a peaceful life without any problems. The fact that Victoria is still with me when I return home is the most motivating thing for me right now. We are both still working, but we are talking about getting married shortly. We have a promise to each other that we are to discuss every little thing with each other. Victoria told me when we first moved in together that I shouldn't keep things to myself. No matter what happens, we will support each other. To be a couple like that is our new goal and dream now.
Anthony, I look forward to spending time with you forever. Anthony, I look forward to spending time with you forever.
Me too.
Huh, are you proposing to me?
What do you think?
I'll take it as a proposal. I'll accept it.
You're so pushy, Victoria. But that's something I like about you too.
I want to keep smiling like this beside her forever. Actually, I had recently started working, but on that day, I quit and became unemployed. It was a place where I had taken a job without thinking much. I used to believe that if I had a bad day, I could simply quit, and that was how I worked until that day. As expected, my employer was irritated with me for being unmotivated, so I became enraged and quit the company on the spot. Then, as soon as I quit, I felt a fantastic sense of freedom, and I stayed out until midnight, stopping by a family restaurant on my way home. This was a familiar family restaurant that I had been going to since my school days, and there I always sat in the same spot. I sat down and placed my order after ensuring that my preferred seat was empty. I was thinking about what I was going to do next day as I ate the food that was delivered to me. Then other customers came into the restaurant. I looked at the customer and was surprised to see them. The customer seemed to be a father and daughter, both dressed in worn-out clothes. I'm sure they stank and they certainly weren't living a decent life. Are they a homeless father and daughter?
Have you decided what to order? One kid's meal, please.
Without even looking up, the father placed his order. They only ordered one kid's meal. I had assumed based on their physical looks, but perhaps this father and daughter were indeed homeless. They could only order that because they didn't have any money. A little while later, the kids' meal that they ordered arrived.
Is it good?
Yeah, it is. I want some juice too.
The daughter appeared to be in elementary school, if not younger. She probably had no idea of her father's financial situation. But the father smiled as though worried at his daughter's statements. At that moment, I suddenly remembered. Actually, I was confident that I had some cash in my wallet. Normally, I would never think of getting involved with a stranger. But at the time, I was feeling liberated after quitting my work as well as sympathy for the father and daughter. I headed for the seat where the father and daughter were sitting. If you allow me to do so, when I tried to hand him money, his father glanced up, surprised. I'd like to buy your daughter some juice. He looked at me and the money alternately.
Doisha,
Sure, go ahead, take it.
look, this man says he wants to buy you some juice. Say thank you.
Thank you, mister.
You are welcome. With that, I paid the bill and left the restaurant. It was only a whim that I bought juice for the kid, but I felt like I had accomplished something worthwhile and I went home happy. After that, I was unemployed for a while. I didn't have much money saved, and I couldn't make ends meet without a job. So I went to an employment security office and began my job search. But I couldn't find a job easily because of the reason I quit my previous job. As on my way home from the employment security office, I was looking for jobs on my phone. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed.
Oh, did you wake up?
A nurse approached me, touching what looked like an IV. What happened to me?
Oh, peace. You were in a car accident and you were brought here.
I remembered strolling around while glancing at my smartphone. I suddenly felt something strange about my body. Like it wasn't my body. I noticed that I didn't have my leg. My left leg. At hearing my words, the nurse said, "I'll go get the doctor now. He'll explain it to you." According to the explanation, I was hit by a car and my leg became entangled in a truck that followed. To save my life, I had to have my leg amputated. My parents rushed to the hospital, yelled at me, a Tbilisian prammed, and then cried again, saying I was lucky to be alive. Then I began my rehabilitation in the hospital, which proved to be more difficult than I had anticipated. But my heart was more stressed than my body. Even though I was saved, I wondered, what was I going to do now? I was concerned about how people would look at me, and if I could live as an independent person without any help. I also wondered, could I get married? Will I have a family? I couldn't sleep at night because I was consumed with concern about the future. You see how I was released from the hospital 6 months after the accident and returned to my parents' home. It had been a long time since I had visited my hometown, but I was afraid of what people would say. So I ended up living a life of not leaving the house. After a few years of living in a state of boredom, one day I happened to see a documentary about Paralympic athletes on TV. They were so lively and cool. I understood that walking about in wheelchairs with prosthetic legs was nothing to be ashamed of. Those athletes overcome obstacles to achieve their goals, and they appeared to shine brighter as people than I did when I was physically well. I wished to live as proudly as they did. I wanted to actively do what I could. I strongly felt that way. My parents suggested I could stay with them, but I wanted to see if I could be independent even in this scenario. So I decided to rent an apartment nearby and try living on my own. At first, I was a bit confused, but surprisingly, I was able to get through life itself. What was more challenging was going out and finding a job. As I had difficulty obtaining work due to my disability. I decided to get used to going out, so I first visited the town where I used to about 10 years. I passed a family restaurant while wheeling through the streets I used to walk on. Oh, I know this place. It was the family restaurant where I used to eat frequently. After I went into the family restaurant, as the taste of the meals I used to eat there might be nostalgic. "Hello there," the waitress greeted me in a cheerful voice, and I entered the restaurant. I was shown my seat and opened the menu.
Oh, I'm sorry, have you decided what to order?
I placed my order and ate what was served to me. The food's flavor brought back memories. While I was thinking that, I felt a gaze. I looked up and saw the waitress from earlier staring at me. However, when her eyes met mine, she looked away and went to the back of the restaurant. I wondered if it was because I was in a wheelchair. I was uncomfortable, so I paid the bill and left the restaurant as soon as I finished my meal. Excuse me, with that voice, I turned around to see the waitress standing there.
Have you ever purchased juice for someone?
You asking if I've ever bought someone juice? Yes, about 10 years ago in this restaurant, to a homeless father and his daughter. A homeless family? Oh, now that you mentioned it. Finally remembered after being told that much. Here indeed, approximately 10 years ago, I bought juice for a father and his child who were dressed miserably.
Do you recall I was that girl back then?
You are that girl. I was surprised. I had completely forgotten about treating a drink to her. I had no clue that at a place like this, I would be reunited with the girl I had treated for the first time in 10 years. I couldn't forget about you for a long time, but I knew nothing about you, and I've been to this family restaurant a few times, but I've never met you. Actually, I relocated to a cheaper apartment in the next town over after meeting them, because I was unemployed. But I really wanted to see you, so I decided to work here part-time to see if you would come back. Please, would you allow us to thank you for what you did for us? Oh, no, that won't be necessary. That was merely a whim, not genuine kindness. Despite this father and daughter remembered me all these times to thank me for what I had done. I had no intention of doing much for them, so their generosity shocked me rather than moved me. I thanked her for her thoughtfulness, but explained that I hadn't done anything particularly noteworthy. Declined her offer and was about to leave when she said,
On a minute, but you saved our lives that time.
"Save our lives," I thought she was kind of exaggerating. When I remained silent, she continued her story. According to what I heard, her father used to run a small factory. However, he was duped by a friend, and I went into debt, and everything he owned, including the house and the factory, was repossessed. We had nowhere to go and were forced to become homeless as we continued to flee debt. Collectors. I was a child at that time and didn't really understand what was going on, but my father thought we couldn't survive any longer. He was desperate, not knowing what to do. So he took me to his family restaurant with the last of his money to purchase food for me. So that's where we met. Thankful to you for what you did for us back then. My father regained hope in life after realizing what a joy it was to receive kindness from someone, and we managed to change since then. I just bought her juice, but such a minor deed caused this father and daughter to reconsider.
I don't mean to be rude, but from the way you look now, you must have had a difficult time in the last 10 years. Babe, guys, it's been bothering me for a long time, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. If there's anything we can do, we would like to help you.
Her straightforward words almost made me cry. Then, as she requested, I returned to the family restaurant and waited for her to finish her work over coffee. Her name was Lily White, and she was a first-year high school student. When she finished her work, her father came to pick her up. Maybe she told him about me?
He finally found you. I appreciate what you did for us back then.
But when her father saw me, he bowed deeply, and then he saw me in my wheelchair.
So, it must have been a tough time for you. It is, as may have heard from my daughter, we really were saved by your casual kindness at that moment. He's ready to start over after that, and that's exactly what I did. I was willing to work harder because I had previously given up on my life. At least I worked as hard as I could, and met many people along the way, and now I'm able to start over like this. Now my daughter is in high school, and I have a stable job. Thank you so much for giving me the energy to live.
Oh, don't mention it, but I didn't expect this outcome. So I was so happy to hear your story. Thank you very much. Then Lily's father invited me to have dinner with them, and I was led to their house. I was surprised when I saw the house they took me to.
We are homeless, and you must be surprised to find us living in a house like this.
Yeah, I am surprised. Your father must have worked hard. When I asked her about it, she told me that her father worked for a construction company. They were allowed to live in a house that was once a show home, but has now fallen out of favor. I'm glad to hear that. While I was waiting and conversing with Lily, her father cooked hamburgers, steak, and rice were served. He inquired about my future while we were eating. I told him truthfully that I couldn't find work because of my disabilities. Then, her father asked if I was interested in construction.
If you want, I can talk to the company I work for.
He offered me help. Things moved rapidly from there, and I was tasked with designing a house that would be comfortable for people with disabilities. Mr. White deserves a lot of credit for introducing me to such fulfilling work. When I told him that, he replied, "It feels like we are finally able to repay you for your kindness." I never imagined that a simple, trivial act of compassion could lead to something so momentous. I'm determined to tackle my life honestly and seriously, and I'm sure I will meet many more people in the future